Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. On the show today, Texas women's gets a big win over the number 2 team in the country. The men's team gets a much-needed win over the number 25 team in the country in their third Big 12 road win, leading the Big 12 in road wins, leading the Big 12 in something. We'll talk some Big 12 basketball. We'll also go into a little NBA talk as well with the trade deadline looming now on Thursday. Get a little bit into the Pro Bowl and what all-star sports you're a fan of. Senior Bowl was this weekend, and the Super Bowl is next weekend, or was it last weekend? And this, I don't know how to say things. Well, of course, we'll get into a whole lot more than that. And, of course, your text messages, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776 is the text line number for you guys to join the show. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. That means whatever you guys want to talk about, your theories, your comments, questions, concerns, whatever it is, send those in on the text line. We'll get to the big fat poll of the day a little bit later where you guys can talk about that. But anything else, you want to talk about some Texas basketball, you want to talk about some Texas football, you want to talk about some Super Bowl action, you can do all of that on the text line, 512-447-3776. I hope everybody had a good weekend. The weather was pretty nice for most of it, I believe. Got to get out and enjoy some of the weather and just relax and chill. And now, watch basketball. But without football, it doesn't feel as aggressive. It feels like the sports week. The sports is kind of opening up because you watch a game, but it's only 2 hours of college basketball or 3 for NBA, 2.5, 3 for NBA. A little bit more opening where you can take a break and go walk the dog. It's nice, get that part. And it's not over yet. It's not when we get to the point where there starts to be less and less. And then we'll have baseball coming up soon enough. I know they're getting ready. Just did the alumni game for Texas baseball as well. Getting into a good part of the season where it's not as cold anymore. I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. And I hope you enjoyed a big win for Texas women's basketball that came on Sunday. They were taking on number 2 Kansas State here at Texas after having that big game at Baylor and a clutch win at Baylor. They come back home to the Moody and get another big win as they're continuing trying to find their footing as Roy Harmon went down with that injury. And it kind of felt like that could have been a pretty hard blow to the team. They did drop a little bit, had a little bit of struggles, seemed to be finding themselves now. Madison Booker having herself a season, another 23-6 game. And someone else to note here that just when you watch the game and you see what's happening in it, Shea Holley. You have to look at what Shea Holley is doing and appreciate that this is someone who didn't get a ton of run for most of her career, was going to be a bench player in a vital role for the Longhorns this year behind Rory Harmon, but not necessarily the one to take control of everything. She ends up playing 40 minutes in that game, and she doesn't score any points, but her impact is undeniable. Her defense and her toughness, everything she does in that aspect. She also ends up with 6 assists and no turnovers. And if you're playing Vic Schaefer basketball and you can play a full 40 minutes without getting pulled, and it's not because you're putting up enough points that he has to leave you in, that means you're doing a lot of things right. So Shea Holley showing, stepping up into that role where she's not necessarily going to be, the player of the week every week, but just one of those pieces when you put together really good programs and programs that are going to be able to compete later in the season and compete in tournaments and just compete at a high level defensively, which is what Texas wants to do. Shea Holley has been a big piece of that and had one of those games where you have to make special note of when someone doesn't score but still puts on a really good performance like she did on Sunday. Going over to the men's side, the men were able to get a big win over TCU, number 25 TCU on Saturday. It was a game that really seemed like it was in chunks and in pieces. The Texas started out really slow again, really started out in that area that I don't know what it is, and you can tell it in their eyes that they're trying to play with composure. They're trying to play intentional basketball when they come out. They're trying to, but they're not because there's no energy. There's no movement without the ball. There's no urgency to any part of the game. And, it's a runner who comes out and is trying to make sure that, they're going to be able to run the whole marathon, but you start out so slow that there's no shot you got. near the end, and then you're trying to catch up at the end, and the pacing doesn't seem right for this team yet, that the players just don't seem to get into that mindset early enough. But then they do flip it on. They get into those timeouts. The timeouts, Rodney Terry's able to get them back into where they need to be, start picking up the action a little bit better, and Texas is able to turn it around. They come through the rest of the game. Dylan Disu coming in pieces in the first half, gets into foul trouble early, has to miss some in that first half, but they were able to finish the half strong. Then in the second half, Texas is fighting into that area where it's a real going back and forth. They're starting to trade buckets, which always worries you if you're a Texas fan, because that's not Texas style of basketball, especially against a team like TCU who can score at that level. And so about 8 minutes left in the game, 7 minutes left in the game, I started to get a little bit worried about the fact that they were continuing to try and trade baskets and the defensive pressure was not up enough. And then we get to the defensive pressure starts to step up. However, that slows it down in the offensive end, and they're not able to score. And then Max Abmas, who had not really had a big game, hadn't been able to get the ball, was basically getting put off. Wasn't thrilled with his involvement of still trying to move around and break up a defense without the ball. That is something he's never really had to do. It's something he needs to get better at, considering he's going to go to a level of play where he's not going to be the guy next season. Most likely, if he's trying to get to that next level, he has to be able to learn to play without the ball more. So he wasn't able to do that. However, you can't complain about anything he did at the end of the game, where he ends up with 21 points, and pretty much all of that comes down at the end of the game. That stretch there at the end where he just starts shooting lights out. He hits all his free throws. He does everything he needs to at the end of the game to pull away from TCU, and a big win for Texas, being able to walk away, pull away from them at the end of the game, not allow them back in. Max Abmas has a great end of the game, and you have to note a few of those pieces that Dylan Mitchell, you saw in that game, and there's going to be more games like that this season. That Dylan Mitchell, we talked about it on Friday, that this was going to be a game for him that was going to be he was the pace setter, because he's going up against Emmanuel Miller, who is going to be their guy. And he is now in a position where they're going to drive the paint, which is what they did early. They're going to drive the paint like BYU did against Texas and try and just go to the rim. And especially if Dylan Disu gets in foul trouble, Dylan Mitchell is the other help guy for trying to come in. And they're going to set up Emmanuel Miller at the three-point line. And every time they're going to drive the paint, they'll kick it right out to Emmanuel Miller. And I think they should have done it a million more times in the game. I don't know why they didn't. But it was you saw Dylan Mitchell get stuck in places in that game where he was stuck in between the rim protecting and trying to guard the three, which meant he couldn't really do either. And I think he got better later in the game, showing energy and picking his battles. I think the rest of the guys found a better way to kind of stay in front of their guys, allow Dylan Mitchell to come over and help, allow rotations defensively to not allow Emmanuel Miller to get those wide open threes where it looked like he was going to get more and more of those. He ends up shooting 3 for 4 from 3. So I don't know why they did not try that more and more. Texas did adjust to it somewhat, but not fully enough. But the way it went is, for a lot of games for the rest of this year for Dylan Mitchell, as much as he's not the guy, he's not going to be ever the guy that you're going to run your offense through. He's not the guy that you're really running your defense through. But he is so vitally important because of what his athleticism brings, because he's going to be a guy that teams are trying to attack, that players are going to want to go after because he is the NBA prospect. So the coaches may not be lining up, but players, he's going to be guarding those 6'8", 6'9" guys that the NBA is also looking at. Dylan Mitchell, how he's going to be able to stay on the defensive end, continue to help in rim protection, but be able to go out and guard on the perimeter, stay in front of guys, and then in transition, in fast breaks, and cuts, in rebounding. He ends up with 11 rebounds, 4 offensive rebounds in that game. Those come out huge for Texas. He ends up with 13 points and 11 rebounds. It's a great line. He doesn't pick up a foul in the game either. And in reality, he held Emmanuel Miller to 15 points, which you can't complain. If Dylan Mitchell gives you 13 and he holds their leading scorer to 15, I don't think you can complain too much about that. You would have liked to see it for 40 minutes. It's a hard job. I think he did well for what the situation was and looked like a NBA talent at a lot of points in this game, which is what you wanted to see, and an opportunity for him to do that. Also a big moment for Caden Shedrick that they changed the rotation. Kendall Weaver gets into the starting lineup into this game. He's earned it. He's come from not playing a lot of minutes to we see him showing the energy, showing his ability to not turn the ball over, showing his ability to continue to grow and make less mistakes. He gets into the position, gets into that starting lineup now as a third guard. IT Horton, who you really would love to have in there because the spacing is a little bit better with IT Horton in there, but he wasn't hitting threes anyway. And if he's not hitting shots, the spacing's not going to be better. You can't leave him wide open, but you don't have to be right on him at this point. So if he's not hitting those shots and he can't bring the defensive intensity and the rebounding that Kendall Weaver brings, then you're going to have to pull back on him a little bit. And I think we saw that with Kendall Weaver in the starting lineup. IT Horton only plays up 3 minutes in this game. But that allows for a different kind of lineup now where Caden Shedrick felt like he was playing a little bit better in this game. I think the rotation helped him out get into a little bit better flow. He ends up with 9 points in the game, some good rebounds. That the goaltending call he got that ended up with the 3, I think was a BS call. It was a call by a ref who couldn't see the angle on it. It looked like even on the replay that it was behind the rim. So I was not a fan of the call, but I get why they did it, but I was not a fan of it. But I think he had some good plays in that game. He still needs to step up and continue to grow in the game, but this is the best he's looked in the last 2 or 3, basically since the back spasms. This was probably the best he looked in a game, Caden Shedrick. Tyrese Hunter, not his best game at all. I think that the guards and the size they were able to put on them at points really kind of threw him off, and the fact that they've been running that 2-guard system with him and Max Abmas, and Max Abmas basically just walked away from the play a lot of times and tried to pull Micah Peavy, who's 6'8", 6'9". He kind of just tried to pull him away from the play a little bit. Again, not what I would love to see is, an effective offense, but I think it put Tyrese Hunter in situations where he wasn't ready to, he was not expecting to basically have to run a system where he was the only point guard and they were playing a 4-on-4 game, and he did not adjust great to that. Ends up 3-9, 0-2 in the game. But, at the end of the day, those types of plays, Brock Cunningham, of course, being able to hit 2 threes, he goes 2 for 2 for threes. That Brock Cunningham, if that guy comes back, who's able to play 23 minutes, but I think that's, again, part of the rotation of getting them a few more minutes and getting them in the game a little bit more and working that rotation. Now, his minutes will go down with Dylan Dessous, I believe. I think that if Dessous, doesn't get in foul trouble early, he plays at least 30 minutes in that game, which knocks down Brock some. But I think all of those pieces where you don't really like to go into the tournament in a 7-man rotation, you'd like to be able to have another guard. I'd like to see Chris Johnson get another try if IT Horton is not going to be done. You hope that at some point this benching of IT Horton allows him to start kind of figuring it and turning that corner. You like to be able to see that. I don't know how much it will, but that is something that you'd like to be able to see as they continue on in the season. The turnovers were too high in the game. The energy wasn't right at the beginning. You allowed too high of a field goal percentage. There's plenty of stuff to work on, but you did get some of your pieces right for Texas. You out-rebounded them wholly. They only had 14 defensive rebounds. You had 14 offensive rebounds. Like that offense, when you are even offensive to defensive rebounds in a game, that's a crazy stat that doesn't happen often. That's a lot of effort from everybody on the roster. Everyone but Abmas and Horton, who only played 3 minutes, and Max Abmas had an offensive rebound. That type of gang rebounding for Texas is going to be a piece that if they can continue to do that and not allow the fast break points, which TCU only had 16, not the end of the world. Texas also attacked the paint well in the game, 44 points in the paint. But yeah, those second chance points, 17 second chance points to 5 from TCU. The rebounding advantage, that energy, what we said that what they found against Houston, where Houston was able to come in and go at him at a high clip. That's what you want to see from this Texas team as they continue on and take on an Iowa State team on Tuesday. You're going to need that intensity against Iowa State. It's another good team. It is your 6th ranked team in a row. You're going to have to continue to work and push on those types of things. But, you showed pieces of what you need. Now, can you start to push that for more and more of 40 minutes? Strength and conditioning is going to be a huge part. As we saw, they're down to a 7-man rotation right now. That is a tight rotation. You really like to be at 8-man, but IT Horton playing 3 minutes, I'm not counting him as part of that. that means you're really at a 7-man rotation now for Texas pretty early into where you want to be. You may be in a 7-man when you get to the tournament, but, man, it's going to be all hands on deck for everybody, those 7 guys, that they all need to be contributing at a high clip now and stay in conditioning, because that's a tight roster. And if anything happens, you have to worry about that. But right now, Rodney Terry is still getting this team to grow, and it's in a position that you feel that there is some, more of, when you look at it, that the Dylan Disu injury early in the season just hurt this team's growth at a level of not being able to find your right lineups that work until well into Big 12 play, and you're just kind of behind the 8 ball, but you're trying to figure it out now, and that's what you're going with. You'll see how it works Tuesday against Iowa State. A couple other big games happening in the Big 12. We said Houston. There is a big game, Houston at Kansas. Again, this was a Kansas home court advantage all day long. Houston just could never get it going, and Kansas could not turn it off. They were just dominating this game. They win 78-65. Jamal Sheed has to have big games for Houston. LJ Cryer had a decent amount of points, but it was on under 50% shooting, so it's not necessarily what you need to see there. When Jamal Sheed goes 2 for 9 for 7 points, they're a very beatable team, and Kansas ends up shooting 69% from the field, 46% from 3. They out-rebound Houston as well. They use their size. I think they were able to watch and get in there and use the size and advantage that Texas did not have. They are a little bit bigger maybe with a couple guys, but overall not bigger than Houston. Kansas does have size. They're able to get the rebounding advantage, and Houston just shoots 36%, 31 from 3. Not enough firepower when you're going up against a team that was shooting as well and scoring as well as Kansas was. Almost 70% from the field. It's just a crazy number to be shooting against one of the best defensive teams. That's that road advantage, home court advantage in the Big 12. Iowa State loses to Baylor 70-68 at Baylor. Another matchup of 2 top 25 teams. This was a weird game. Scott Drew gets ejected for coming out of the coaching box. It's an annoying thing that some refs get really, really up about, especially if they're getting yelled at during the game and they don't like it. They'll use that as their excuse to call technicals. That's what it kind of felt like, that Baylor was complaining too much. And so they used the fact that he was out of the coach's box. Every coach gets out of the box almost every game. Bob Huggins was the only guy who didn't really do it. But everyone, especially in big moments, gets out of their coaching box. It just happens. You have to be a little bit nicer about it. There's 55 total free throws in that game. I get why both coaches are upset. It ends up with Keyshawn Gilbert with 24 points in the game. And Milan Momčević hits 3 at the very end. It's after the buzzer, so it does not count, and Baylor gets away with a win. A big road win, though, over the Big 12 on the weekend. Cincinnati gets the win over Texas Tech, 75-72. Cincinnati just hung with them the whole game, playing them tough. If you look at everything, you watch the game, the stats, everything's pretty evenly matched. The reality was the defense was a little bit too much for Pop Isaacs. He goes 5 for 19. He still gets 22 points, but that bulk shooting is never a good sign. And when you get their star player, their best offensive player in a Tech system, it does hurt them a little bit. And Cincinnati's able to pull out a big win over Texas Tech on the road. Let's hit a little NBA before we hit the break. We also got the Spurs go on, lose both games over the weekend. They took on the Pelicans and the Cavs. They lose to the Pelicans 114-113, a really big game. Zion hits a game winner there. But a good step forward for the Spurs in that game, hanging with the top power and doing really well, even with Keldon Johnson out. Then we see the Cavs just take care of it, 117-101 over the Spurs. The Spurs do fight back in that one, but Evan Mobley, too much early on. He just gets it going, and the Spurs are not able to match up with all of the weapons that the Cavs end up having. Rockets split their weekend series. They play on Friday. They beat the Raptors 135-106, 84 points in the paint for the Rockets in that game. They're able to get it going. Jakob Poeltl was out, so there was no real competition for Şengün to go inside and open up the game. Cam Whitmore had a big game in there too. And then on Sunday, the Timberwolves, again, one of the best teams in the West, beats the Rockets 111-90. Too much size then for the Rockets, who don't necessarily have the defensive bigs. Anthony Edwards goes off for 32 points in that game. The Mavericks only played on Saturday. They lose a game with the Bucks, where is a lot of scoring, 129-117. Giannis There's no stopper. That's why the Mavs want to bring in a power forward. Is there some of these teams that are just killing them right now with power forwards? And Giannis puts up 48.6 assists in 6 rebounds and 10 assists. Doncic puts up 49 and 11, but not enough to get it done. Kyrie Irving's supposed to be back tonight. He was not back for that game. Maxi Kleber, though, actually has a good game, 21 points in that game, trying to show off a little bit. One of those guys, not consistent, not necessarily physical enough and strong enough at a lot of those points, but he can have good games. And, used correctly, Maxi Kleber can be an okay piece for your team. You'd like him to be your backup power forward, like in that backup forward role. That's where you'd like to be. But, the Mavs just haven't been able to find their guys, and the injuries have not allowed them to do that. The Mavericks tonight taking on the 76ers should be an interesting matchup because we know that Joel Embiid is going to have surgery on his left meniscus. He had an injury on his left meniscus. He is out till scheduled right now, April 15th. There's some hope that he may be able to come back early. I don't know if Joel Embiid is a guy I'm believing is going to come back early. I don't know if they should rush him back. He was playing amazing this season. I'm sure they're going to fight this back, that this was a 65-game rule and he shouldn't have been on the court. But I believe it was just more of a natural injury that ends up there. Just for a note, when they say April 15th, the regular season ends on April 14th, I believe. So it would be, they're hoping to have him back by the playoffs, but a huge blow for the 76ers, who've been playing really well this season. But he ends up getting hurt. It does open the door. Kyrie Irving should be returning for the Mavs tonight. I believe Lively is out, but Kyrie Irving should be returning. So it'll be a very big chance for the Mavs to get a big win over an Eastern Conference top opponent. Let's get to the big fat poll of the day. We'll get to some of your text messages.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
Big Fat Poll of the Day today, 512-447-3776. Big Fat Poll of the Day today with the Pro Bowl this weekend. It was an interesting what they're trying to do to change it. Having it over a few multiple days and doing the, on Thursday and then putting it off till Sunday. I don't know why. I would have put those a little bit closer together. I guess trying to spread it out for, press, and because it is, Super Bowl, it's done right before the Super Bowl. But Pro Bowl weekend, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. But I think that's a lot of all-star weekends. So the question is, for you guys, what's the best all-star event in sports? And now we can go into the best league. So is it, the NBA? Is it NFL? Is it the hockey and NHL? Is there a soccer one that they're doing well in? What's the best MLB, their MLB weekend? Is it that? Or is it the home run derby? Is it the slam dunk contest, skills competition, three-point shootouts? Is it one of these new games? You just tell me all the things you like, and I'd love to hear what's all the things that you would say, I would want to watch this, I want to watch this. It may be something that you go, I don't care about any of this, or this was stupid and I didn't like that. I'd love to hear more about what is good in All-Star Weekends as we try and solutions-oriented, figure out ways to make All-Star Weekend and suggestions for All-Star Weekends to make them a little bit more fun and a little bit more, I don't know if you can make them competitive anymore, just really in any sport, because of, players just realizing that it's not worth it, that the money no longer, can make it really worth it. So you have to make it to where it's competitive. We'll talk more about the Pro Bowl in the 5 o'clock hour as well, because we'll put in the NFL segment. But I'm just curious, 512-447-3776. What's the best all-star event in sports? What's your thought on all-star games? A Pro Bowl just happened. NBA, NHL all-stars are coming up as well. We know MLB, they have, the home run derby. But do you want them to add other skills competitions in MLB? Let us know on the text line, 512-447-3776. We come back, we're going to play an interview from Hook 'em Up with Jerry Hamilton from this morning. When we come back here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Theme of the week, Super Bowl halftime performers. So we get in. I was thinking of what to do with the Super Bowl. We're going with the halftime performers. Some good people on that list. Some people I'd probably leave off that you really liked because they didn't necessarily have the greatest bring back intro music. Some I like that I didn't make it on the list. But we got songs for you this week. Super Bowl halftime performers is on the list. I don't know how I feel about Usher. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I've been blown away by people that I thought would be just okay before, and I've also been very right about people that I thought would be just okay. I don't normally think anything's gonna be terrible. There's stuff that I'm like I don't care, and so I'll just leave. But I'm usually hanging out with other people, so I can do whatever I need to do in that moment. Text line's open 512-447-3776. What is the best all-star event in sports? Your thoughts on all-star events. We'd love to hear them on the text line 512-447-3776. I'm going to play this interview from Jerry Hamilton from Hook 'em Up this morning. He joined the show. Always good when he joins it because some great info from Jerry Hamilton. So play that interview for you right now on a little Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
Let's go to the Vaqueros Cafe.
is what I'm seeing. I thought all along we're headed to two 24-team super conferences in college football, and everybody else is going to go by the wayside. I think this is clearly where it's headed. I think this is another sign for that with me. But I'm not a guy that will have all the answers on this topic, that's for sure. I think Bobby Burton has more thoughts on this maybe than I do. But I do think this is the first time we're really seeing the Big Ten and the SEC, which are going to be your two power conferences long-term in college football, kind of say, all right, we are going to take, in our own way, we're going to take control of this. And so I think the battle started is essentially what just happened on Friday.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hopefully it's the first step of many, because this is, season's over. Now it's about, the school presidents meet for their winter and spring meetings. The conferences get together. That's where a lot of these, really heavy and important conversations can be had, because obviously we know there has to be some guardrails put into what's currently happening, the Wild Wild West, and what's going on right now with portals and NIL, just not sustainable long term. It's good. There are good growth ideas for college football, but they need some structure, obviously, and someone to control that structure. And maybe the first step on that came down on Friday. Hey, Jerry, we appreciate it, my friend. We know you got Coffee and Football coming up with the On Texas channel coming up at 8 o'clock. Thanks so much for the visit again and the insight on Texas hoops and a little college football. Thanks, my friend.
You got it, guys. Thanks.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian and Rod B. Talking with Jerry Hamilton there on weekday morning 6 to 11 here on the Horn, and some other news pretty breaking that could be impactful when they're talking about that advisory board from the Big 12 and the SEC. I'll get into more of that in the 5 o'clock because that just happened very recently. We'll talk about what that and how it could expedite things a little bit more for college sports in general. We'll talk about that. When we come back, though, we'll get to your text messages, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. We're asking you, what is the best all-star event in sports? Your thoughts on all-star weekends and all-star games, and the Pro Bowl just happened and they had a bunch of different games. What was your favorite of that? If you watched any of it, do you like any of the NBA all-star weekend? That's coming up shortly. NHL, is there anything there? MLB, you love the home run derby, the MLB game. They're trying to make it matter. What is it to you that is your favorite part? What do you like about it? What do you not like? 512-447-3776. And anything you want to talk about, college basketball, pro basketball, NFL, college football, we can talk about that too on the text line, 512-447-3776. We'll come back. We'll get to your text messages. We come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back in the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a Monday afternoon. Text lines open 512-447-3776. Poll of the day. What is the best all-star event in sports? Anything you want to talk about all-star? After the Pro Bowl weekend, I don't know how many people even watched it. I did my part. I tuned in. You know, there wasn't any other football on. I thought, why not tune in to watch that as well? Yeah, once we get into the 5 o'clock hour, we'll get into a little, Senior Bowl and NFL, get ready for the Super Bowl, some coaching news. We'll get into all that and a big story that is breaking right now that is not necessarily big in what it is, but what it could mean to college sports is pretty big. So we'll mention all of that when we come back in the 5 o'clock. But let's get to the text line 512-447-3776. Texter says, is everyone excited for T Swizzle to return from her Please Make It Stop tour to have her boyfriend propose to her at the football festival or whatever this weekend? I stay away from talking Taylor Swift now because it is on my timeline constantly of either side and people. I just stay away from talking about it. I think we have enough of it, so I just stay away from it. That's be the change you want to see in the world. I don't care, so I stay away from it. Shay Holly's a female Brock Cunningham who's a poor man's Kendall Weaver. I love them all. I believe Shay is also a Westlake student as well, Westlake kid as well. So it makes sense. It makes sense that they have the comparison. But yes, great effort from Shay Holly on Sunday and this whole season, but stepping in for Rory Harmon. But yes, a big game for her on Sunday. Jimmy the Gringo says, what do you think Texas needs for as far as players or efforts to be able to go deep in the tournament come March? From Jimmy the Gringo. I will say, I think, you need Dylan DeSue to continue playing at his level, get a little bit, maybe, work on that a little bit more. I did really like what he did in that game of where, and I don't know if it's so much him or Rodney or a combination, but early in the game, he was just kind of going up against Uda and he just was undersized in that thing and was able to get pushed back on it. And his moves weren't working, and so they just stretched him out a little bit more. And if you have a big like that, Dylan DeSue does bring that ability to be able to draw your guys out and then drive past him because he's more athletic than most of those 7-footers are going to be that are going to be able to stop him in the post. So he can step out and hit threes and make you pull it out and let other guys attack. Or if you want to stay in the paint, then he can. And if you go, okay, well, now we'll pull him out and put in a younger guy or a smaller guy who can run with Dylan DeSue, then he has those low post moves and ability to open up a little bit of space and make those shots. So he has to step up. And really, Max Abmas needs to be able to play 40 minutes of being able to score consistently for Texas to have a shot when you get in the tournament. As far as any other players, you just need Max Abmas to be more of a 25 and to 30 guy and not where he's at right now, which is a 15 to 20 guy, and then he'll get some more on free throws. You really want him to be scoring 25. That'll be Texas at their best right now. And Tyrese Hunter, it is. When you have a 7-man rotation, everybody has to step up. Tyrese Hunter had a slower game, and, that hurts all the way down the line. You also want to see Caden Shedrick step up more. But, yeah, I mean, we could go through all 7 of them need to step up if they want to have a shot because they just don't have necessarily the deepest or talented roster in the NCAA. So to have a shot as you start getting into the tournament and the Big 12 tournament, you really need extraordinary performances out of some of the guys who've shown that ability at certain times this season. My man, Nate, I do appreciate you trying to make me laugh. I appreciate that. Man Chan says Donna Summers rocks. Yes, she is Diana Ross. Sorry, Diana Ross. I said Donna Summers. Diana Ross rocks. Yeah, she's pretty good. She's one of the ones that is a part we're playing all Super Bowl halftime performers. She was one of the first. I think it was a celebration of something, but she was the main event doing everything. Most of those Super Bowl halftime shows, other than like her and Michael Jackson, were a group of people, and everybody keep coming out, and those were not always the best. Not always the best. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to more of your text messages, and we will get into some football talk and a story that is breaking right now that could have effects across the world of college sports, not just football, not just basketball, but across college sports. We'll get into that as we continue the sports complex here on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. We'll get into a little college football talk, a little NFL. Of course, more of your text messages. 512-447-3776 is the text line. Poll of the day. What is the best all-star event in sports? After we had the Pro Bowl this weekend, we'll get into a little bit more. But your events that you like the most, the events you like in any sport and the All-Star Weekend, what do you enjoy about All-Star Weekends? Are you just done with them altogether? They're no good. Do you want to get rid of All-Star Weekends? Do you have a solution to fix All-Star Weekends? I'd love to hear it. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. I do want to get some NFL talk, and then we'll talk Senior Bowl in a minute, too. We were playing a clip earlier with Jerry Hamilton and Aaron Hogan talking about, that Big Ten SEC advisory panel or board or whatever it is that they are starting to meet to discuss things. Something that may come up that may start to press it. This was reported about 4 o'clock today from Pete Nakos. As he says, major college sports news. The National Labor Relations Board Regional Director in Region 1, that's a long one, in Boston, has issued a decision ruling Dartmouth men's basketball players are employees of Dartmouth. The NLRB ordering a union election. So basically saying it's one school that asked legally to be able to be claimed as employees. And so far, the courts at that level have decided that they are going to be considered employees. So we have a case now where there are employees in college sports. Now, from what I'm trying to read, and this all came out at 4, so there's not a lot of people that are out there yet, and you can't read a ton on it yet, but they're saying that will be appealed. So it does not necessarily mean that it will hold. This was a similar thing that happened in 2015 that was appealed and eventually turned down. So it does not mean the end yet. But it does mean that Big Ten SEC advisory board that is joining just got the first piece of, oh, crap, we may not have the length of time we thought we were going to have. We may not have the runway of, okay, let's kind of ease into this over the next 5 to 10 years. This may be this needs to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. I think that they'll be able to legally postpone things and push it off for at least 5, but you never know in these types of situations. But it does seem to be pushing more and more to people having to figure out, especially in college football, where there's just going to be so much money and so many eyes on it, how to fix the problems and put some guardrails up for transfer portal, put some guardrails up for recruiting, and put some guardrails up for NIL to try and, just find a middle ground where the NCAA doesn't care because they all want it to go away. They just want to keep making their money. They may have pushed too far this time, and rulings like this, if they continue to come down, will effectively start to kill the NCAA and allow for the conferences to make their own new system, especially for college football. But that is big news that Dartmouth basketball players, have won their suit and are now considered employees of Dartmouth. Let's see what spanning effects. Again, that will most likely be appealed is what I'm reading. And then that will mean that there will be then another piece of time until anything happens. But that is big news. After we saw the Big Ten and SEC form their advisory board, this seems to be big news of someone starting to unionize in sports and college players starting to unionize. Where that could end up, we will have to wait and see with that news. But that is big there. Also in college sports, the Senior Bowl was on Saturday. It was not a great game. We saw players not really knowing how to play with each other and, trying to rotate guys out. And then apparently the ball was slippery, I guess. And it ends up the national team beats the American team 16-7. Christian Jones has an okay showing. T'Vondre Sweat, included with the practices and everything involved in it, continued to show. He had some highlights where he wasn't necessarily making the biggest plays, but if you were watching him, which the scouts are watching, they were still double-teaming him basically every single play, and he was getting double-teamed and still making tackles and disrupting on run games where I don't know if there's anyone if you're trying to find a run stopper right now, I don't know too many guys that you would say would be below him or above him as a run stopper. Seem to continue to rise his draft stock. We know Byron Murphy is still being ranked as getting drafted ahead of him, but I think both those guys could find themselves in the first round if T'Vondre Sweat We'll see what his measurables are and his speed. If he shows speed and agility and all of that in the combine, it could be more of a reason for someone to take a shot on him. He will either be that or usually probably an early second-round pick. But T'Vondre Sweat going up those charts, realizing what Texas fans already know, and that is that T'Vondre Sweat is a menace on the football field. And that guy, I don't get why people are not so sold on it. I know you could put in different pieces, and it's a defensive tackle, and defensive tackles are not always, especially run-stopping defensive tackles may not be the guy you want to get in the first round. You want to get an edge, or you want to get a cornerback, or you want to get another piece. So it's more position-based of why he's not a first-round pick right now. But that guy's another level of physicality, and what he did in practice and watching him bend guys up and just push guys around, knowing that he's somebody that if you put him on the right team, especially if you have an edge and you realize that they're going to have to double and they can't double both, or else they're going to have to, basically put a tight end on him, put a tight end out there to try and help on the edge a lot more, or else, that type of playing for T'Vondre Sweat, he looks dominant still playing in the Senior Bowl in that game. Looking over at some NFL talk, looking in the coaching cycle, the Commanders have now hired Cliff Kingsbury as their offensive coordinator, bringing him in and making you believe that they will at least make a play for that number one pick. And I know Caleb Williams is dividing everybody, but we went through this last year with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, and we know with C.J. Stroud what he ended up being. Caleb Williams is very divisive because, especially for Texas fans, because we saw him at OU. He followed Lincoln Riley, who's divisive also. Didn't have a great season at USC. Puts up numbers, but not necessarily the guy. He does things off script, which is not always what you want to see. But he's also been one where he's been thought of as the number one pick for so long that he just kind of isn't. But that could be. You're number 2 at Washington, so it's not unbelievable to think that they could make a trade to move up that number 1 spot. If Chicago wanted to move down again, they could and get more picks or more players or whatever they wanted to get. But an interesting move there to hire Cliff Kingsbury. This whole what the Commanders are doing, this new ownership seems like they should have brought in some more people to kind of help them. They seem a little bit behind. There's this part now where they're kind of smearing Ben Johnson because he decided not to go there and they were upset about it. So they're kind of smearing him. They get Dan Quinn, who's a good coach, but I don't think that was their number one choice. He brings in Cliff Kingsbury to give you another kind of name in there, but another name that I don't know if it's the name that is necessarily the greatest OC. He is definitely in the media, though, a big name. And then for the defense, they do bring in Joe Witt Jr., who was with Dan Quinn at Dallas. And now that pushes Dallas to now have to make a different decision. Joe Witt Jr. was thought to be one of the top picks for Dallas at the defensive coordinator position. If you wanted to keep some consistency, especially Mike McCarthy, when you have one more year, if you wanted to try and put somebody in there and just promote from within instead of bringing somebody else in, not knowing the future of the head coach position past this season and I know Jerry believes in the hope, and so he wants to believe that they will continue to use Mike McCarthy past this season, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will. If they have another playoff blowout, then you have to move on. So you didn't necessarily want to change scheme. So Joe Witt Jr. would have seemed like the first choice, the guy to go do it. He also said that's his dream job, but it makes sense for him. There's some other names that are going to be interviewed for Dallas. They have an interview lineup. They were going to make their choice through a number of different – they weren't going to be rushed to make their choice for Dallas. And for Joe Witt Jr., you can't wait until Washington fills their position for you to wait and go out and then try and, and then maybe lose that job too and then not be able to move up to a DC position. I understand why he did it. He gets to stay with Dan Quinn, who he knows very well. Dan Quinn said today that Joe Witt Jr. will be calling the plays for the Commanders. So a big move for him. It does leave Dallas, again, without their defensive coordinator left, and he took probably their number 1 pick as DC, or at least their internal number 1 pick. That's why we've heard names. Mike Vrabel's name has been mentioned, even though there was a report that a GM at the Senior Bowl said that he's so imposing of a figure that some owners and GMs don't want to hire him because he's so imposing of a figure, which if that's true, that explains why the NFL has so many bad decisions. Ron Rivera, we know, is going to be coming in for an interview. And the interesting name, Mike Zimmer, who had basically been off working and doing some stuff with Deion Sanders. He worked at Jackson State, had been out of the NFL for a little bit, but has definite ties to Dallas and the Jones family. He is apparently interested in that position now, trying to go win another title with Dallas. It would be an interesting hire to see if they bring in Mike Zimmer. That now feels like the front runner. Al Harris is somebody that was there that you thought maybe could have been the guy who could have stepped in if you want to keep consistency. I think the biggest question now is, I think Mike Zimmer might be the guy. Is his defense not going to be too outdated? Is he able to move with the times of the NFL? Is he ready to take those next steps and continue to grow? And can he continue to grow with the players? Is Micah Parsons going to be on board with this? Is Trayvon Diggs, and you've re-signed Trayvon, so it's not as big of a deal, but you want your defense happy. Are those guys going to be able to go in? And does he want to use your players, or does he need to go out and get his own defense now? And you're talking about going all in, but now most of your draft is going to be going to Mike Zimmer, and you can't really put too much on the offense because you're having to rebuild a defense that needs linebacker help. That if you don't keep Gilmore, depending on what he does, he said he's a free agent. What do you do at that point? But it's an interesting place because Mike Zimmer might be the front runner now for that Dallas defensive coordinator position. All this move also means that Eric Bieniemy, the highly sought-after offensive coordinator but not head coach Eric Bieniemy, is, he was with the Chiefs forever. He ends up going to the Commanders last year to try and break out and have his own, get his own success. He didn't do terribly with the Commanders for what they had. Just not a lot of pieces, and working with Sam Howell as your starting quarterback, but it did not do him any favors. He is now out with bringing in Cliff Kingsbury. They mentioned today after hiring another OC that he was not going to be returning. He's kind of left in the dark now because there's only 2 offensive coordinator positions still out. So there's really only a couple places if he wants to not take a step further back for Eric Bieniemy, if he wants to keep moving forward or at least stay the same at offensive coordinator. The 2 positions that are out there, the Chargers, which you assume he's not going to go work with Jim Harbaugh. That feels like a not a great move for a offensive-minded coach who's going to be doing the most of the stuff himself. I don't know if you want to go in there and be, with Jim Harbaugh. It's possible, but that is one of the open positions. And the other one right now is the Seahawks are looking for their OC, and that one makes a lot of sense. If there's no one else, I think Eric Bieniemy is a hell of a coach. He's done a lot. I think he can bring some of that toughness back to that running game. Help out Geno. See if you can get Geno a little bit more out. Help with your young quarterbacks as well and build them up. But I don't mind him in Seattle. That seems like it could be a fit. The other piece that you wonder about is there still are Andy Reid retirement rumors. Those are still coming out that especially if he wins another Super Bowl, this may be it for him. He's 65 years old. He's not, the pinnacle of health, we can say. And, maybe at 65, he's one of those guys that worked really hard but said, man, I always thought I was going to retire at 65. And I don't want to be doing the as hard it is working 100+ hours a week, trying to be a head coach anymore. And I can step back into an advisor role and an executive role with the Chiefs and still be part of the team, but move on. And then you have the question of, well, do you bring back Bieniemy, who knows the system and the players all know him and love him, and you bring him back into the fold, and either he's now the OC and running everything on the offense, and you promote Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator who's been dominating, or you hire Eric Bieniemy as the head coach and you keep Spags as your defensive coordinator, depending on where all the love and admiration for each other comes. That would be an interesting piece. So that's another piece you have to look at. As for the Seahawks, there is the news that Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator for the Giants, they wanted to bring him in. I'm not sure why you looked at that offense and thought, man, I really need the mastermind behind the Giants offense when they have Brian Daboll as coach. But Mike Kafka is a guy they were looking at. But the Giants have blocked them being able to interview him for a lateral move. You can block in the NFL for lateral moves. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. You want to join the conversation on there. We'll get back to the text line very shortly. Some other places, the Pro Bowl was this weekend. The NFC does win again, 64-59 the AFC. That's with all the games added in And in the NFC, basically won all of the games. I think most of the games the NFC ends up winning. The actual game, if you just looked at what the score was in the actual game, the AFC won. CJ Stroud had a shot at the end and couldn't get it in. The rules, I feel like next season they might want to work on actually understanding what the rules of the game were. It's hilarious to watch Ray Lewis get really upset about it and Peyton Manning get really upset about this over and over again. But look, they were taking it seriously enough. They did pull Gardner Minshew was in near the end. And they decided to put Gardner Minshew back on the bench to put CJ Stroud in because they figured he was going to give them the best shot to win and did okay. But it was a weird, it's flag football. I don't think any of them know how to do that. And especially if you have wide receivers that are like a Keenan Allen, who's like, I'm used to contact. I'm not the speedster guy. He was willing to play, but didn't get all the love in that. And finally, we'll mention quickly, if anybody wants to start talking about the Super Bowl, 49ers are still a 1.5 favorite over the Chiefs. I kind of thought it would have already switched by now and the Chiefs would be favorite because of Patrick Mahomes. This is going to be a week-long discussion. We'll keep going on about it. We didn't talk much about it today, but the Super Bowl is going to be a week-long discussion with everybody, kind of getting us ready for it. This is a matchup. The more you look at it, it feels like the 49ers are supposed to be the loaded team that the Chiefs have kind of felt like they haven't had enough pieces all season. But you look at Vegas and you look at everything else and you say, well, the 49ers should be it. But it's Patrick Mahomes and how they got here. And it just seems like the Chiefs, you can't bet against these guys. The defense is playing well. The Steve Spagnuolo defense is playing better than the 49ers defense, especially against, the run back. Like, there's spaces where that trade for Chase Young for the 49ers, where it seemed like it was going to be huge, hasn't necessarily been that piece yet. So let me know if we keep getting your thoughts on the Super Bowl. We'll keep talking about it, but I want to talk with you on the text line today, and then we'll start going into pieces and breaking it down as the week goes on, and there's not as much other news we got to hit before we got to get to breaks. So let us know if you've got some takes, if you've got some pieces or questions or early thoughts about the Super Bowl on a Monday of Super Bowl weekend. Hit those up on the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to the text line, and we'll play a little bit more of another Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex on the Horn, playing Super Bowl halftime show performers all week long here on the Horn, getting you ready for the Super Bowl on Sunday. It is going to be a good Super Bowl Sunday. Look, and as much as anybody can say about anything else, is it's two teams, and there's not necessarily, the fan favorite of people. They want to see something new and see something different or whatever. It's two really good football teams, and we know that. It's two really good football teams. It's not somebody who kind of lucked their way into it where you're not sure what's going to happen, and it seems one-sided. It is like the game that San Francisco is favored in against a team that it feels like it's sacrilege now to bet against. But that's just me. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. Texter, one of the haters, says Texas men's basketball is consistently inconsistent. Have you watched college basketball? I feel like that's college basketball. Is consistently inconsistent. I don't know if there's a team in college basketball in 2024 that is somewhat inconsistent. Because it used to be you get away with getting more consistent teams by threatening to bench players and ruin their NBA dreams, by verbally abusing players, by doing a lot of things that would not be viewed as okay in 2024, and all the players would transfer. You would not have no recruits and no players. Back in the day, though, you get away with that a lot more. You can't get away with that anymore. And so you have to coach in a different way, which means there's going to be more inconsistency because you can't, lie, cheat, and steal your way to getting guys forced to really just this is all they do and they practice. You forget class, you practice all day. That was what some of these places, and even then, even 20 years ago, there was still a mostly inconsistency in college basketball because they are young men and it's just there's a lot of teams. So you're not going to get necessarily always 5 stars. Texter says matchup is key for Texas men's to make a run. We could get lucky. I mean, I think it's hard to get all the way there this year unless the team starts to play a little bit more effectively. And some of those players that we mentioned, like if Max Abmas starts to turn it on in the Big 12 tournament, then who knows? But I've not seen him yet become that guy. For 2 or 3 games in a row. If he does that, then anything's possible. But until then. And then also for our poll today, MLB Home Run Derby event, without question the best. I like the Home Run Derby. I like that they keep trying to change it up to and make it work. But it is a fun tournament. That is one that if participation could be a little bit more, and I know it can't. I know participation is probably the key to everything. It could be even more fun. Texter says, the problem with the NFL Pro Bowl activities is that players' compensation for participation is completely controlled by their agents. No pay, no play. Also, all activities are supported by corporate sponsorship. No sponsor, no Pro Bowl activity. These 2 factors are going to kill it. I mean, you're going to get sponsors for anything. Like, they're the NFL. They can get their sponsors, and they can put money on it. I don't think that part of it is too much of a problem. I get that player participation is not necessarily, and that's kind of why you get the O&D linemen to do a lot of the other stuff, and you get people that aren't necessarily the top guys. That's why Njoku and Puka Nacua were the 2 guys trying to do the biggest catch, because it was like, okay, we're not going to get the biggest names to go do that because they're not going to risk, hurting themselves or looking like a fool. They don't want to hurt their brand. But I think there's still ways to try and make it more fun of events where you go, well, we don't need necessarily the best. Gardner Minshew's there. He's a good guy, good player, but I bet he would be willing to do some more dumb stuff. We can get him on some, make it more of the Battle of the Network star kind of thing. Go with that route instead of, trying to just be like, we have to have these names, not care. I feel like that's always going to be the losing bet. And Nate says, okay, the slam dunk contest is still the one for me, even if it's not what it used to be. I always feel like it could come back. And every year you're like, maybe if they get the right guys, and then they don't, and they get lesser and lesser guys. The 3-point shootout is a star show now. And then, but also Juicy, we can talk about this more tomorrow if we want to. I don't know how much, but they are now on All-Star Weekend. There's going to be a glass over the top court or something to that effect of the court and LED lights all throughout the court for the All-Star skills competition. I do not believe for the game, but I think for a lot of the other stuff, they're doing the court up. And I've seen the videos of it and stuff, and it's supposed to be all LED, and so it'll be the visuals of it should be insane. Now, I don't know if the players are like that, if it'll help or it'll make it different or it'll be too showy, but they're trying to make LEDs on the court now during the event, so we'll see how that ends up working. But that is something they're going to be doing this year for the NBA. So, it could make the slam dunk contest. The lighting could help make it something special. I mean, you look back at the old ones that are great still, and you think, well, they didn't really need all the flair. Like the Vince Carter ones didn't need all that. But I guess if you need it now, you might as well add it. I want to give you a little hook 'em up replay here, talking about some coaching stuff and some college football coaching and kind of what players and coaches are going through right now. And starting off with some Dallas coordinator position talk and rolling through when Mike Craven joined Aaron Hogan this morning with Rod Babers out on a little hook 'em up replay here on the Sports Complex.
But we're also talking about what's popping with the Cowboys. Ty, have you said and confirmed? Do you have an official favorite for Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator? Is it who? Who's your guy? Because I know last week we talked about a little bit like Joe Witt Jr. would be a good promotion, but he's already landed in Washington. Do you have a favorite for the Cowboys?
That my favorite?
Yes.
I'd have to agree with y'all that Mike Zimmer, just because of the familiarity with him and the Jones family. Beyond that, who I would like to see is Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the fan sentiment, because then man, he may end up being our head coach, and that might be a good move. It's so funny. I don't want to say poor Mike McCarthy, but at some level, poor Mike McCarthy. That everybody in Cowboy Land that I know wanted Dan Quinn to be the head coach, and not Mike McCarthy. And now you may hire Mike Vrabel, whoever's saying, man, I wish Mike McCarthy was not our coach.
I still don't understand what the Titans were thinking. Like, anytime you fire a head coach and everybody in your division is happy about it, and then every fan base in the country wants their team to hire that guy, you probably fired the wrong dude.
Well, and I think the answer is Amy Adams Strunk, and I will never root for a member of the Adams family.
No,
because I'm a Bud Adams.
I won't even watch the Adams family.
Oh, because of them.
Yeah.
Well, she's the daughter of Bud Adams, the criminal that he was, scoundrel. She essentially said, because and Rod and I have been through this, but last year or 18 months ago, Mike Vrabel got at odds with their general manager, and there's a lot of friction, and most people believe it centered around the A.J. Brown trade. That when A.J. Brown on draft night was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike Vrabel was furious about it. Like, what are we doing? I mean, we just traded one of the best young receivers in all of pro football, and we got this combination of Derrick Henry pounding the rock. We got this receiver out here that no one can cover. That Ryan Tannehill was playing his best football at the time, and I think it led to kind of a split of opinion there. And remember, Mike Vrabel, the general manager, was brought in with Mike he was from the Patriots tree. And then, so they fired him. Mike Vrabel won that power struggle, and Amy Adams Strunk hired Rand Cawthorn from the 49ers. And he came in, and Mike Vrabel couldn't get along with him either. And so they had friction, and I think she just said, you know what, I'm choosing, I'm going to take Cawthorn because I think his vision for the future is right, and you can't get along with anybody, so we're going to let you go. Is that a good organizational decision? We'll see. And the fact that Vrabel didn't get a job, I think that there are some folks who think he might be a little bit too prickly. If you're going to look in an era of collaboration, and you're trying to work together with a chain of command and those kind of things, and maybe Vrabel kind of shies away from that, which, if he gets hired in Dallas, he reports to Jerry Jones. Because somebody asked earlier, are the Cowboys kind of unique in that usually the head coach hires his defensive coordinator. Usually whoever the coach is, he makes these decisions. No. Not in Dallas. Like, how much of a percentage do you think Mike McCarthy will have say on who the defensive coordinator is?
0. I mean, 5% maybe. Yeah. I mean, we know who the final answer is, in that it does. I think this carousel of coaching changes at the college and the pro level has really solidified the idea that the game is getting younger. You see the head coaches getting hired in college and the pros, and they tend to be younger guys. Bill Belichick didn't get a job, right? Pete Carroll's not a head coach in college or something like that. He didn't drop down a level. Dan Quinn got passed over for Mike McDonald, who's a younger defensive guy out in Seattle. And so it does feel like collaboration and youth and just kind of doing it a different way is taking over. But I kind of grew up where the best head coaches were prickly. That was like that's what you wanted as a head coach, was somebody who was a little bit, tough to get along with, who was kind of a taskmaster, no nonsense. Vrabel kind of fits that bill perfectly. I'm surprised. If he wanted to be, I'm surprised he's not a head coach.
It is interesting because you're right about that. But now, kind of the Jim Harbaugh's still Jim Harbaugh. He's a weirdo. But, Steve Sarkisian mold a coach, kind of more of a player's coach, and which is great, right? Being vulnerable, getting down on their level, talking with them, getting connected. That wasn't always the case. And I do think there's kind of a today's player. You got to be able to relate with today's player, motivate today's player, which, they're a different generation. And look, Belichick, that part, the only team that interviewed him was Atlanta.
Yeah.
And if you really dig into that interview, the only person who wanted to interview him was the owner, Arthur Blank. Rich McKay, the president, really, they didn't want him. Because they knew he would come in and want to only answer to the owner, which would break down their chain of command that they've built. Again, is this good? But this is how organizations are built. And I think everyone's trying to copy what's working, which is what you do in a copycat league. In Kansas City, Brett Veach works with Andy Reid closely on building the roster and the vision that he and Steve Spagnuolo have for it. Obviously, they have Patrick Mahomes, and that takes it to a different level. In San Francisco, when Kyle Shanahan was hired, he specifically wanted a general manager, but he wanted to pick the general manager. He wanted to pick the guy that he could work with, and their vision of football is the same. Same thing happened in Detroit with with Dan Campbell and their Brad Holmes, their general manager. And I think we just saw it in Houston with DeMeco Ryans and Bobby and Nick Caserio. You want the chain of command, because the head coach can't do all of it, right? You can't do everything. I don't think it's wise to try to do that, which is what Bill Belichick's been trying to do in New England the last half decade. And you want someone to handle the draft board and the scouting and all the pickups during the week, all the things that a general manager does week to week and all year round. But you want someone who sees the game like you do, that you have a shared vision of the game of football. And the best example is, I think, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, because, John Lynch played for Kyle Shanahan's dad. He's a Hall of Fame player, and they view football the same. So they work together. I'm sure they disagree quite a lot, but that's a healthy chain of command, in my opinion. And the Cowboys have none, which, again, Mike McCarthy's going to have no say in who the defensive coordinator is.
Tom Brady's been retired for a couple seasons now. If he came out of retirement, he'd have an easier time finding a job than Bill Belichick.
Oh, 100%.
And that it's just wild to see how fast the greatest of all time, I think we all agree is the greatest NFL coach of all time, at least the most accomplished NFL coach of all time, just went without a job, that nobody really wanted him around, and like why that is and how the sport can change so quickly. Because 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case.
Inconceivable.
Obviously.
Well, you'd have to trade multiple first-round draft picks to get a Bill Belichick, right? 5 years ago. He's won 8 rings as a defensive coordinator, a head coach. He's unbelievable, the records he set. But at the same time, we thought maybe Vrabel and he would have to be traded for before they were fired, and neither of them got jobs.
Probably for similar reasons.
Yeah, I think so.
No.
I think so. They don't fit in these days. And, one of the reasons Mike McCarthy wasn't fired in Dallas is he does fit in. He fits into exactly what Jerry Jones wants.
The players have power in a way that they used to, and if the players like you, you get to stay around for a little bit longer. If the players don't like you, you're gone, and that's true in the college level with NIL and stuff as well. Like, you have to be a player's coach
that's
because
right.
they are partners in the endeavor with you in a way that they never were before.
Yeah. Yep. That is part of it, because everybody blames the players and NIL. At the same time, the coaches used to have an iron fist and run the programs way too rigidly, which led to all these court losses, by the way, in my opinion. And that's why the NCAA's lost in court over and over again, because they really didn't have legal leg to stand on. That's not how you got to give some freedom. You can't lock these players in for 2 seasons. That's just not, fundamental fairness. And then, of course, the income part of it and the name, image, and likeness. So, yes, now the college coaches, they're scurrying for the NFL because, A, it's more time-consuming, and they're not in full control anymore. Mm-hmm. They've got to run a business now, and they've got to treat employees really good.
Yeah.
Because
the calendar as well. Like in the NFL, you have set dates of when you're working in the
that
offseason,
has to change,
right?
That has to
and
change.
in college, like I remember when TCU was in the national championship 2 years ago, they had to send half of their staff back from Los Angeles on a Saturday before the game on a Monday because they had people on campus. They were recruiting, right? Like you recruit, I want to say 49 weeks out of the year or something like that.
Yep.
And so. If you can get paid roughly the same to go work less, we're all going to take that.
Sure.
I'll take that tomorrow. And so they have to do something to help these coaches have a little bit of life balance,
100%.
or they're gonna lose them all to burnout.
No, there's no question, and we've had that conversation a bunch. It is the calendar has to change. This is another part of what 2024 needs to have happen, and not just the beginnings of whatever structure they're going to put in place, who is in charge, and what the apparatus is. There's also got to be a calendar change because next year you're playing a 12-team playoffs is going to play all the way into late January. So
don't even get me started.
Yes. So that has to be figured out. But point being, the coaches used to have full control, especially at the college level. and the NFL. It's getting less and less. And you just like in any business, you've got to work to keep the best talent because the best talent can leave. I mean, that's what most people can do. If you hate your job and hate your boss, you can go, and you can go work somewhere else and do something else. And that's what great companies try to do. They strive to keep the elite talent, not run it off because they're not treating them right. At some level, whether you like NIL or not, it's forcing colleges and coaches to, now again, it swings way too far sometimes, and the kid wants this and wants that and wants to, then you cut him loose, I would say. But at the same time, you do have to re-recruit your own players and connect with them and make sure they feel like they're a valuable part of your organization, and that is a change for sure.
Yes, change is in the air in college sports for sure now. We got to take our last break. We'll come back. We'll hit the text line. If you got any more for me, 512-447-3776. And we will get out of here and get you ready for a Monday night here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, we got to get out of here. Appreciate everybody joining us and playing along on the text line. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss more, get more into the Super Bowl, get you ready for Texas versus Iowa State tomorrow night as well. Getting everything ready. Another big sports week as we wrap up football. I mean, we'll talk about football still. Of course we will. But we're getting closer and closer to the games being over for football. One more this week. We'll talk about it more tomorrow with Texas and everything else. Play along with you guys on the text line. Until then, be safe, be kind, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for more in the Sports Complex.